All right, let's jump right into this explainer. If you've been keeping tabs on the health and longevity space lately, you know that 2026 has been an absolute watershed year. But while the mainstream headlines are entirely fixated on the extreme weight loss from GLP-1 agonists, there's a quieter, arguably much more profound revolution happening right now in the realm of tissue repair, muscle preservation, and overall vitality.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look beyond the GLP-1 hype, then decode growth hormone secretagogues, dive into type 1 peptides like Tesamorelin and CJC-1295, explore the type 2 Ipamorelin advantage, and wrap up by navigating the risks and the new 2026 landscape. Let's get to it.
Part 1. Beyond the GLP-1 hype. We're looking at the hidden cost of rapid weight loss.
To really grasp this whole peptide boom, we've got to look at the massive shadow cast by GLP-1s. 71.2 pounds. That is the staggering average weight loss achieved in the Phase 3 TRIUMPH-4 retatrutide trials. Eli Lilly's triple hormone receptor agonist is pulling off things that are frankly unprecedented. But as the medical community is quickly learning, this kind of extreme fat loss comes with a pretty huge catch.
I mean, shedding 70 pounds sounds absolutely incredible on paper, right? But physicians like Dr. Craig Conover are raising alarm bells. They're seeing this rapid weight loss strip away crucial lean muscle mass right alongside the fat. We're talking about frailty, a total loss of physical durability, and that infamous Ozempic face, that skeletal, hollowed-out look from rapid fat pad depletion. So patients are dropping the weight for sure, but they're literally losing their strength. And that is exactly why they're rushing to find regenerative, tissue-preserving solutions. Moving right along to Part 2, decoding growth hormones secretagogues, the biological regulators.
Okay, so if GLP-1s shrink you down, these compounds are essentially designed to build you back up. But hold on, not in a dangerous way. The crucial thing to understand here is that you are not injecting exogenous synthetic growth hormone. Doing that actually shuts down your body's natural production, and trust me, that's a negative feedback loop you definitely want to avoid. Instead, secretagogues are just these tiny little chains of amino acids. Think of them as tapping your brain's pituitary gland on the shoulder, simply signaling it to produce its own natural pulses of growth hormone. You're working with your biology, not overriding it.
To make the mechanics really click, let's use a car analogy. We generally divide these compounds into two main camps. Type 1 peptides basically mimic your natural growth hormone-releasing hormone. They act just like pressing the biological gas pedal, sending a direct message to the pituitary to push out growth hormone. Now, type 2 peptides, they mimic a hunger hormone called ghrelin. These guys act like cutting the brakes by suppressing somatostatin, which is your body's natural inhibitor of growth hormone. So you're either pressing the gas or you're cutting the brakes.
All right, Section 3, Type 1, Tesamorelin and CJC-1295. Time to press the gas pedal.
When we line up the heavy hitters here, we're looking at two type 1s, Tesamorelin and CJC-1295, and one type 2, Ipamorelin. You'll probably notice right away the drastic differences in dosing schedules. That's dictated entirely by how long each compound naturally hangs around in your system, its half-life. We'll get to Ipamorelin in a second, but let's take a closer look at our type 1 gas pedals first. Let's zoom in on Tesamorelin. It is hugely popular, and a big reason for that is it carries full FDA approval, specifically for reducing visceral fat in HIV patients. So it's this highly targeted compound that goes right after that deep, dangerous organ fat. Dr. Andrew Huberman actually notes it has a relatively clean safety profile, it lasts a bit longer in your system than older peptides like sermorelin, and it's heavily associated with better slow-wave deep sleep and overall physical durability. But then we have its type 1 sibling, CJC-1295. And man, this one is a bit more complicated. It features something called a drug affinity complex, or DAC, which basically makes it last for days in the system. That means you only need to inject it maybe once or twice a week. Sounds super convenient, right? Well, it carries some heavy baggage. During clinical trials, there was actually a death related to cardiovascular dysfunction, which was potentially linked to the serious fluid retention this peptide causes. That is a massive red flag. So for a lot of cautious practitioners out there, Tesamorelin's safety profile just makes it a far better choice.
Which brings us to Section 4, Type 2, the Ipamorelin advantage. Let's talk about cutting those brakes safely.
Okay, so we know these type 2 peptides cut the biological brakes by suppressing somatostatin. But why exactly has Ipamorelin become the absolute gold standard in this category? Well, it all comes down to its incredibly clean profile. Look,
Older type 2 peptides like hexarelin or GHRP6, they will absolutely boost your growth hormone, but they are messy. They cause massive cortisol spikes, raise your prolactin, and trigger this aggressive, ravenous hunger, the kind that has you emptying your fridge at 2 in the morning. Ipamorelin is praised specifically because it doesn't do any of those things. It removes the brake on growth hormone without triggering your stress or hunger pathways, which makes it super tolerable for long-term use. Let's trace the exact biological sequence of a nightly Ipamorelin protocol. You administer it about 45 minutes before sleep, and you do this on an empty stomach because insulin actually blunts the effect. Once it's in your system, it suppresses the somatostatin in your brain. Then, your pituitary is free to release a massive, perfectly natural pulse of growth hormone right as you slip into deep sleep. Your liver takes that, converts it into IGF-1, and boom, your body basically turns your sleep into a highly efficient, hypercharged repair cycle for muscle, tendon, and skin tissue. And finally, Section 5, Risks and the 2026 Landscape. Let's navigate the safety and legality of all this. Now, we have to balance these amazing regenerative benefits against the very real medical and regulatory risks. Because, let's be honest, there is no free biological lunch. The crucial safety point here is captured perfectly by Dr. Andrew Huberman. Growth hormone and IGF-1, they repair tissue indiscriminately. If you have a torn rotator cuff, great, it helps heal it. But if you have an undetected microtumor, it will happily supply the growth signals to accelerate that tumor too. Anytime you augment growth pathways, it intrinsically carries a cancer risk, and that is exactly why doing this under strict medical supervision is absolutely non-negotiable. Beyond the tumor risks, you've really got to watch out for receptor desensitization. If you blast your pituitary with way too high a dose of something like hexarelin, you can literally permanently turn off your body's natural receptor pathways. Yikes. There's also water retention to worry about. And perhaps the biggest danger prior to 2026? Sourcing. The FDA found that over 40% of peptides bought from unregulated gray market research chemical websites contained inaccurate dosing, degradation, or just outright contamination. Which brings us to the massive regulatory shift that totally changed the game this year. In February of 2026, the Department of Health and Human Services announced their intent to restore access to these peptides. By April 15th, the FDA officially removed 12 key peptides, including compounds like BPC-157, CJC-1295, and Ipamorelin, from the highly restricted Category 2 list. This essentially set the stage for formal advisory reviews over the summer in July. So what does this reclassification actually mean for you? Well, it means these peptides got moved back to Category 1. They can now be legally produced by licensed 503A compounding pharmacies, which completely ensures pharmaceutical-grade purity. But you have to have a valid physician's prescription and be doing proper blood work monitoring. Now, to be crystal clear, this is not full FDA drug approval. They are still off-label therapeutics. But it effectively ends that incredibly dangerous era of relying on sketchy internet research chemical vendors. Quality control is finally back. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've basically mastered the art of losing weight in 2026. GLP-1s have definitively won that battle. But as we all shrink our waistlines, the new frontier is preserving what is underneath. So will the responsible, medically supervised use of peptides like Ipamorelin and Tesamorelin become our primary standard of care tool for protecting our muscle, our durability, and our ultimate vitality? The science is clearly there, the regulations are finally adapting, and the choice of exactly how we age is increasingly in our own hands. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.